Welcome. Welcome to the Worcester Senior Center. So today we have Bob Ainsworth returning. He was our distinguished speaker back last August who spoke about the Isabella Gardner Museum heist. And today he has a really interesting program, Ponzi's Duped, Cons, and Scammed, the history of fraud throughout the ages. So this is quite a wonderful talk, and he'll take questions after. So please welcome Bob Ainsworth. Right after, we'll have lunch, and then John Poirier is coming in to perform. Welcome back, Bob Ainsworth.
So usually I play golf on Tuesdays, and I didn't play yesterday. So to my brain, yesterday was the day after golf, which was Wednesday, which was when I was supposed to be here. And about 1 in the afternoon, I realized it was Wednesday, which it wasn't, and freaked out and went running through the house and had to find my schedule and then find my phone and figure out what day it was, and then I was calm. But for about 10 minutes, I went nuts because I've done over 100 of these. I haven't missed one yet. You know, I make sure I show up. I show up on time. I'm early. And so for about 10 minutes yesterday was a bad day. But after that, it was fine. So thank you all for showing up. This is really fun seeing the dollar bill stuff. I think when I did the Gardner one, you had museum stuff and you had a painting and all sorts of stuff. So this is really good stuff. So my name is Bob Ainsworth. I live in Marlboro. I was an accountant in my life. And I also taught accounting. I taught at Clark and other universities. And my students always loved when I told them stories about frauds and scams, just because it was better than listening to me talk about debits and credits, which even though I was an accountant, they're boring as hell. So nobody really wants to learn debits and credits, but they liked my stories. And that sort of led me, once I started writing, that maybe I would do a book about Charles Ponzi. So one of my books is, it's a prequel to my other stuff, but it talks about Ponzi. So he was in Boston in 1920, and I'll show you more about him, but he operated from the end of December of 1919 until the beginning of August. And then that was it. It didn't take very long, but he got about $12 million from, I think, 20,000 people. The average money given to him was $300, which back then was a lot of money. Right? People only made $1,500 a year. So to give over your life savings to this guy, he had to be pretty good, and he was a good scammer. Anyway, so what's that? What do you see up there? But what's happening? Well, is it a zebra? Somebody's painting stripes on a donkey to make him look like a zebra. Okay? Do any of you remember the movie or the play, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, Zero Mostel? That's in the opening scene. So you sort of know the movie's going to be all about scamming people. How about The Sting? Right? Great movie, great actors, good story, nice little twist at the end. Good scam movie. This one you might not know as much. Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, but good cast, right? Steve Martin, Michael Caine, and they're fraudsters, and the woman in the middle scams them. As kind of a twist, but then at the end she comes back and something happens. I won't spoil it for you. So I want you to think about these questions while I go through this. What makes a con game or a scam? Like, what are the attributes of it? What has to be done in order for somebody to run one of those? And what are the people like who do it? Right? It's not everybody who goes around trying to take money from other people. You have to have a certain personality. So when I go through this, look at who I'm talking about and how I talk about them. And you're going to get answers to both of those questions. What's that? What does that look like to you? Swampland where? Florida. Florida swampland. You could have bought that many, many times. You could have actually bought it from Charles Ponzi at one point. he ended up selling swampland in Florida. How about that? The Brooklyn Bridge. You could have bought that too, right? There was a guy who was selling the Brooklyn Bridge. How about that? You could have bought that too in the early 1900s. Somebody was selling the Eiffel Tower. This one's a little different. Take a look at what's going on there. It's printing money out of a wooden box. That's the original black box, right? The black box that turns like $1 into 20s. That's what that is. And somebody was using that you could buy that box and you would put in your dollar and out would come a 20. So these are all scams that have been happening forever. So this is one of the first scams that I can find. Now, let me step back a second. You have to remember, money wasn't prevalent until the 1800s, really, right, 1700s. Before then, it was all about commodities. So this is a scam called bottomry. And what somebody would do, they would borrow money to buy the ship. And then they would borrow money to put grain or something on it, and they'd sail across the Mediterranean. Except they would tell the person they borrowed the money from that the ship sunk, everything was destroyed, I'm sorry, I can't pay you back. Except none of that was true. They took the boat to another port, they sold the grain, they sold the boat, and then they went to another port and did the same thing over and over again. So it's really more of an insurance scam, but it was definitely a scam. What do those guys look like? Soldiers, the Praetorian Guard. Any of you know what the Praetorian Guard was? So they were sort of the secret service of their day who protected the Roman emperor. And at one point, the Praetorian Guard decided to kill the emperor and then put being the emperor up for auction. So you could have bought your title to be the emperor of Rome at one point. And then they took all the money and just ran away with it. So not very good protectors. How about that one? The Shroud of Turin. Now, I hate to break this to you, but that is not the image of Christ. This thing was created in the 1300s. It's just charcoal and other stuff, and somebody put it on a piece of fabric. But that was used by the Catholic Church. You know, you go around, you see the Shroud of Turin, you give them money, you know, you don't go to purgatory, you go to heaven, all that sort of stuff. So it's just sort of another thing that was being used to get money. This is the first stock fraud I could find. So again, you know, companies, the idea of having a company, a corporation, is fairly new. That was, again, in the 1700s, the 1600s. If you remember Pirates of the Caribbean, right? Who was he pillaging? Who was he pirating against? The East India Trading Company. That was one of the first companies that existed, where people would pool their money and own something. So this guy sort of took that idea. He was a member of Parliament. He was Scottish, but a member of the British Parliament. And he talked people into investing in his company that owned land in Honduras. And the land was called Poyais, P-O-Y-A-I. And he said that he was the chieftain or the Kazi of that Poyais country. So people gave him money. He rented a boat. He put all of them on it. He did 5 or 6 trips of people, sending them to Honduras. And what happens when they get there? Jungle. He doesn't own anything. He doesn't own the rights to anything. They don't own the rights to anything. They're just dumped in Central America, not knowing what to do. And this is the 1700s. It's not like they can hop on a plane and come back. They're stuck there. So they had given him all their money and gone across the country. So this is George C. Parker. He was the one who was selling the Brooklyn Bridge. Now, not exactly selling the Brooklyn Bridge. What he was selling was the right to put up a toll booth. So he would erect a toll booth. sell you the rights to it. Of course, the cops would come along after a couple of days, take the thing down, but that just meant he could find somebody else to sell it to. Who he went after were recent immigrants, people who didn't know the country, maybe didn't know the language, didn't know that you couldn't put up a toll booth on the Brooklyn Bridge. But he just kept doing it. And he did it for quite a while until he got sent to Sing Sing for life. So George got his comeuppance trying to sell the Brooklyn Bridge over and over. This guy is interesting. So George Parker just kept doing the same thing. Sell the Brooklyn Bridge, sell the Brooklyn Bridge. This guy had a whole bunch of scams. His name was Ludwig Victor Lusig in the early 1900s. It's okay, don't worry about it. So he was the one selling the Eiffel Tower. So what was happening was the country of France and the city of Paris were getting tired of the upkeep on the Eiffel Tower. It was rusting. They didn't want to clean it, so there were thoughts of taking it down. So what he was selling was that you could get all the metal, scrap metal, and then you could sell the scrap metal to the Eiffel Tower. All complete nonsense, but he made it up. He dressed well. He got a really expensive hotel room, had people come in, gave them all sorts of wine and food, and finally ended up selling the rights to the salvage of the Eiffel Tower to somebody. So that was one scam of his. His second scam I kind of think is cute. So remember, this is before radios, obviously telephones and all that. So he would get on a boat in Europe. And across the trip, he would sell people shares in a non-existent Broadway play. But they had no way of checking on it, so they would get to New York. He would hop on a boat that went backwards, and they would think, oh, I've got this Broadway play that's going to show up. So he just kept crossing the Atlantic, selling Broadway plays, sort of like the Zero Mostel, the producers, right? You're selling 1,000% of a play, which obviously you can't do. He's also the one that did that money box. That was his. That was his idea. So he was sort of, and at least he was diversified. He had many methods to take money from people. So do any of you know exactly how a Ponzi scheme works? Ponzi scheme is pretty simple. I'm going to take money from these two people and promise them 50% in 45 days, which is what Ponzi did. So you guys give me your money. Then I go to you 5 people, and I get you 5 to give me money on the same terms, 50%, 45 days. But I take your money and pay them. But now I've got to find people to give me money to pay you guys. So I get these 2 tables to give me money. You give me money, I pay them. They're paid off. These guys are paid off. But they like that they've gotten a high interest rate, so they give me their money back. But now I've got to find people to replace you. So I've got to get everybody back there to give me their money. And that's a Ponzi scheme. You take money from one group, and then a second group, the second pays the first, third pays the second, fourth pays the third, and you keep going. As long as you can find more people to steal from, you're fine. As soon as you can't find new people, you're done. Because people are going to come to you saying, where's my return? So that's all this says. You take money from one group, then you take it from a second, you pay A with B, find C, you take C to pay B, and then you find group D. That's a Ponzi scheme. I was talking with the folks at this table about contractors, and right now I'm in the middle of, my wife and I are in the middle of renovating our house, and our contractor is sort of running a Ponzi scheme-ish. So he took my money, didn't buy the parts, and used that money to pay somebody else. And he's done that with multiple people. I won't name him, although I'd love to put a billboard up with his name on it, but that's a whole different issue. So it's not exactly a Ponzi scheme, but it's pretty close. He's not promising a return. He's just promising to do the job, which he's not doing. Anyway, that's a Ponzi scheme. So, but before Ponzi, people were doing the same thing. It's just Ponzi came along in 1920. So before Ponzi, it was called robbing Peter to pay Paul. Do all of you know Henry VIII? Right? What's Henry VIII famous for? wives. So his first wife was Catholic. He wanted to marry Anne Boleyn. That was Catherine of Aragon was the first. He wanted to marry Anne Boleyn, but the Catholic Church said you can't. So he decided to start the Church of England and break off from the Catholic Church. And he got his second wife, and then after that it was just off to the races with his 6 wives. Anyway, robbing Peter to pay Paul comes from what he did was divert money from St. Peter's Basilica. So money going to the Catholic Church, he took and sent it to St. Paul's. So by robbing the Catholic Church, St. Peter's, and giving it to St. Paul's, he was robbing Peter to pay Paul, which is essentially a Ponzi scheme. And that's where the phrase came from, good old Henry VIII and his desire for different wives. So here's the first Ponzi scheme that I can find. This woman was in Bavaria. She was an actress, and she was getting older and not getting as many good parts and not making as much money. So again, like I said, you have to remember the times. Not only was money not that prevalent, there were no banking laws. There were no laws against fraud. You could do whatever you want. Nobody had even thought of this stuff, but she did. So she got her name was Aldehyde Spitzetter. She opened up a bank in a hotel room, right? You didn't need a bank. You just needed a hotel room. So that's what she did, and she promised 10% interest in 2 months. You all realize 10% interest in 2 months is absolutely impossible, right? Right now you get maybe 4.5% for a year. She's promising 10% in 2 months. Complete lie, but everybody believes it, right? People aren't educated. They don't know about finances. They don't know anything. So they keep giving her money, and she became the wealthiest woman in Bavaria. And so when they caught her, there was nothing they could charge her with other than mishandling funds and bad accounting. That was it. She went 3 years in jail, but she took over 400 million euros, the equivalent, from 32,000 people. Everybody was trying to give her money to get this 10%, which really didn't exist. So there was a New York version of this. And this guy is a guy named Ferdinand Ward, and he opened up a banking firm with somebody named Grant. And that Grant was Ulysses Grant's son. And what they said was, because his father is the president, we're going to get special contracts, and we're going to make way more money than anybody else, and then we're going to share that with you. Not true. So Ulysses Grant Jr. invests $200,000 in those days' money. The president invested $100,000. There's Ulysses. They promised 2% a month, which is 24%, which is even crazier. So they raised $9 million. They took the money. They bought big houses. They went on trips, spent it all, and then the whole thing collapsed. And they lost everything, and Ulysses Grant had to write his memoirs because he was broke. The president of the United States was broke. But he was saying he was robbing Peter to pay Paul. That was the name of the scam. Excuse me. There's another New York case, and I couldn't find a picture of this guy, but this is his certificate. So he gave out a certificate. His name was William Miller, and he promised 10% a week. Right? So do the quick math. 10%, 52 weeks. He promised 520% on your money, which is crazier, but that's why he got called 520% Miller. And he got only $1 million, and then he went to jail. There was a Boston version of this, and this was a woman named Sarah Howe. And she opened up the Ladies' Deposit Bank in the South End in just a room. And she said, I'll do that. So she didn't advertise. She only worked with referrals. So I would only take your money if you told me she was a nice person. So she kept it very quiet. She didn't want people to know about what she was doing. She went after a certain group of people. This is called an affinity scam. She went after single women who had some money but did not own their homes. She was trying to empower single women at the time, but she was scamming them. She promised 2% a month, which is 24%, again, which is impossible. And she said the money to fund this came from Quakers who wanted to help. We're in Boston. Quakers are in Pennsylvania. There's no way to check if the Quakers are doing this, right? There's no way to verify her story. So she just keeps on with it. And she was jailed in 1881 for cheating by false pretenses. Again, there were no real laws against what she was doing. Then, after she got out of jail for that one, she did the same thing in Boston, got caught again, and went to Chicago and did the same thing again. So she's not very imaginative, but she is persistent as hell. So this is her third one. Here she is. She skips Boston, took $50,000, people's money. Went to Chicago, got caught in Chicago, comes back to Boston, does the same thing again, and finally gets caught, and that's the end of her story. But she was just running the same thing over and over again, finding new people who would believe that she would do 2% a month. So I have questions now just for you to think about. What are the ingredients of any kind of scam? They all have certain attributes. Well, of the scam itself. So what do they promise? They promise the world. High interest rates, high returns. You're going to get great money. This is guaranteed, blah, blah, blah. What are the people like? Well, they're able to relate to people. They can talk to them. They find people who will believe them. And many of them go after people who are like them. Again, called an affinity scam. So an affinity scam would be you go after Italian people, Irish people, people who belong to the Knights of Columbus, people you play golf with, people in a coffee club. Anything where people they can gain your trust, that's a scam. I'll talk about victims a little bit, and I'm not painting a broad picture with this, but many people who are scammed have the same attributes, and they want to get rich too. So they think they're going to outsmart the con artist. I know there are many scams that aren't like that are horrible, but many people are trying to outplay the con artist. So, in 1920 is when Ponzi operated. There was actually a fictional scammer at the time. There were a bunch of books with this guy, J. Rufus Wallingford, and that's the actor who played him, a guy named Burr McIntosh, and they made a bunch of short movies. So these things were playing in 1915 and 1916, sort of showing people how to run these scams, because that's what this guy was doing. He was sort of a friendly scammer. The early 1900s, there was child labor, right? Just take you back to the time. Kids were working. Most people did not go to high school. Very few went to college. Nobody had economics or finance or banking or anything like that. People lived on 33 cents an hour. So a family might live on $3,200, but that was actually a lot. So this is how much people made, and you can see that, what did I do? There we go. I got it. Right? Only 2% made over $10,000. Only 19% made over $2,500. So people lived on very little money at the time. CPAs had only started a couple of years before in the early 1900s. The Federal Reserve, that protects all your money, right? The banking thing, they only started in 1913 and they didn't have a lot of power. And the Federal Deposit Insurance Company that insures all your money at banks wasn't created till Franklin Roosevelt. So there were no protections for people. You lose your money, you lose your money. There were 7 newspapers in Boston at the time, most of them with a morning and an afternoon edition. These were the two guys who the newspapers were following while Ponzi was operating. Now, you recognize who those two guys are? Exactly. Sacco and Vanzetti, alleged communists who robbed a bank, I think. And so this was April of 1920. So that's what the stories were. If you look at the headlines, it was all about that. It was nothing about Charles Ponzi. And then came our friend. So in this color picture makes him look kind of friendly. When I turned it black and white, and that's what I put on the cover of my book, he looks a lot more sinister, which he was. So there's his full name. Pardon me for anyone who's Italian and my pronunciation is bad, but it's Carlo Pietro Giovanni Guglielmo Tebaldo Ponzi. He came from a fairly wealthy family. He went to college in Europe. And he came to Boston in 1903. So he hops a boat with $300 or $400, and by the time he arrives, he has $2 because he lost it all gambling. So he shows up in Boston, no money, doesn't speak English, so what does he do? He gets a job in an Italian restaurant, right? Being the bottle washer and all that. And here's his card saying that he came over here, right? Carlo Ponzi from Italy on the Vancouver, November 17th, 1903. So what does he do at the restaurant? He starts stealing from people. He steals tips, he steals from the cash register, he steals from the waiters and the waitresses, so he gets fired. This is his way of making a living, he just steals. So he goes up to Montreal and goes to work for a bank. He gets hired by this guy, Luigi Zerosi, and he's running a bank in Montreal that caters to Italians. Italian workers were going in there a lot. And he's telling the Italian workers, give me your money to my bank because I will pay you a higher interest rate, right? Where have we heard that before? I will give you a higher interest rate than the banks run by the Canadians, the non-Italians. So all these people start giving him their money. He, of course, is running a Ponzi scheme because he can't afford the higher interest rate, and he gets caught and he leaves the country. And he leaves Ponzi in charge of his family. The guy just left and says to Ponzi, you take care of my family. So what does Ponzi do? He steals a blank check and tries to cash it at a bank, stealing once again. But he gets caught. Oh, he had different names also. So he was Charles Ponzi and Charles Bianchi at the time. So he was already using different names. So this is his, oh, by the way, keep watching this picture of him. So this is his mugshot from his first arrest. So he gets out of jail, and then he tries to bring illegal immigrants across the country, and they were paying him. He gets caught by the federal government, U.S. federal government, and they're not happy at all. So there's his second mugshot, right? He's looking way different again, and he gets sent down to Georgia to do his prison time, and he's there until 1913. 1913 comes, he gets released, and he starts traveling the South, just doing odd jobs. He also wrote a biography of this at one time, which is a complete lie, but that's okay. He winds up in New York City and sees a job posted for being a clerk in Boston. So he comes back to Boston because nobody's going to recognize him from when he stole before, so why not? And he comes back and he's got a clerk job at South Market in Faneuil Hall. And he's working as a clerk, $16 a week, and then he meets her, the love of his life, Rose Ginecco. And he falls in love and he courts her, and they get married. And there's their wedding certificate. Now, it's kind of interesting. Remember I said he was a clerk? But on the wedding certificate, he says he's a salesman. So he's given himself a raise now from one to the other. He's still doing the same job. Here's the census in 1920. And there they are. But now look at his title. Now he calls himself a foreign exchange expert. So he's gone from clerk to salesman to foreign exchange expert. None of which is true, but who's going to check? And this is the house where they lived in Somerville. That's what he looks like now. So remember, he had the one mustache, then the other mustache, then this thing. He is a chameleon. He leaves being a clerk to run Rose's uncle's fruit stand. In 3 months, it goes bankrupt. He may have been stealing from them, but it went bankrupt, so he fails at that. Then he decides, I'm going to run an import-export company. The only problem is he has no money to import with, and he has nothing to export. Other than that, he's going to run an import-export company. So what does he do? He steals 5,000 pounds of cheese. 5,000 pounds! That's a lot of cheese. And he gets arrested. He gets caught. But the magistrate made a mistake, and they spelled his name with an S instead of a Z. So the court said, you made a mistake, you can't arrest him. He gets released. Now he has the 5,000 pounds of cheese, and he sells it, and he has a little bit of money. So he decides that even though he's failed, he's going to write a publication about how to run an import-export company, which he failed at. But he writes the publication. That fails too, because he spends too much money printing it. So now he's failed again. And here's where so he was at 227 School Street, near the old City Hall, down the street from the Parker House, right? Still there. So here he was in the Niles building. He was called the Bostonian Advertising and Publishing Company, and there's him. But somebody bought his publication who was from Spain, and they sent him a thing. I handed it out. I don't know where it is. Oh, there you go. Thank you. So somebody sent him one of these coupons. It's called an international reply coupon. It basically lets you send a letter from one country to the other. It was a way to promote intercountry communication. And what he figures out is that those things have different values. So it's just that, they were printed by every country printed their own. And here's what they look like, 3 different versions. And they could be exchanged for postage, but they couldn't be exchanged for cash. They were only good for, you put this in, you get a stamp, put it on your thing, it goes there. Fine. But there was a slight different value of these things based on each country, sort of like now, right? The United States is valued the most. Ecuador is valued poorly. So, but these stamps only cost 5 cents. So even if they were 50% off, that's only 2.5 cents. It's not a lot of money, but he thinks he can tell people he's going to make money on trading these stamps. So his pitch is, you give him money, he goes out and buys millions of these stamps, he trades them, he makes a profit, and then he shares the profit with you. And you will get 50% in 45 days, which is what this thing is. This is his promissory note that he would give people, that he just had printed up at a local printer, although it looks kind of official, it looks like a stock certificate, but that's the point. It's designed to make you think it's worth something, and it's worth zip. So he'll share the profits. The reality was there were only 100,000 of these stamps in the world. So if you could make even 5% on 100,000, it's only $5,000. There's no way he was going to make millions of dollars to share with everybody. But people didn't know that. The other thing was you couldn't turn stamps into cash. It's like Bitcoin right now, right? You invest in Bitcoin, but you can't take Bitcoin and turn it into a US dollar. So what's the point of a Bitcoin if you can't do cash with it? Well, maybe if you're selling drugs or something, it works. But otherwise, I have issues with that. So what was Ponzi doing? He was robbing Peter to pay Paul. It wasn't a Ponzi scheme because they didn't have Ponzi yet, but they would. So here's his scam. He started in the fall. He gets the idea. He starts going out to rich people, but they're too smart to fall for this. So he starts going after poor Italians because he thinks they're gullible, and he's Italian, and they'll believe him. He goes after his own kind. It's an affinity scam. He issues his first note in January. February 15th, he pays off his first people. So he makes good on that. He also had pawned his wife's jewelry without telling her, and he redeems it from the pawn shop and gives it back to her. Nice guy, stealing from his wife's jewelry. So here's how much money and how many people he scammed month by month. So just watch this grow from January on. So January, 18 people, a couple of grand. That's still a lot of money in those days, but it's only a couple of grand. February, about the same people. Now he's getting more money. So remember, he got about $300 from each person who invested. March, it starts to grow. 110. He's up to $25,000 for that month. Here's April. Now he's really cooking. He's got $140,000. But wait. Now he's up to 1,500 people, and he gets almost $500,000 in that month. Then, oh no, just wait. Then he goes to June. Now he's up to almost 8,000 people, and he takes in $2.5 million. This is all in those days' money. Wait till you see July. 20,000 people give him money, and he takes in $6.5 million in 1 month. He operated till about August 8th, so I didn't include the August, but he was cranking it in then. So in total, about 30,000 people, somewhere north of $10 million. They never really got a good count. Somewhere between $10 and $15 million he took. Oh, God. At least 20 times. 20 times. But, well, but most of the people, yes, that's a good question. Most of the people who he's paying off put the money back in. Because they're like, oh, I did it once, I'm going to do it again. I'm just going to keep it rolling, right? You're gambling, right? It's like at your casino. Oh, I won at this, I'm going to keep playing blackjack, blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden you lose and your money's gone. That's what he was doing. So this is where he operated from. It's 27 School Street. He was on the second floor. And that's what it looks like now. There's a Starbucks on the first floor, and he was operating right there on the second floor. It was short. He was 5'2". This is a picture of him with his wife, and he brought his mother over. He sent millions of dollars over to Italy to accounts in her name to hide money. Sort of like sending money to Cayman Islands these days. And here's what his office looked like. And it looked official, right? There's a wall, there's a cage, there's people well dressed. It looks like a legit thing. Why not? Oh, so remember I said in the beginning he was just going after poor Italians? By the time he's getting bigger, you know, he's got cops, he's got guys in suits, he's got lawyers, he had government people giving him money. Everybody was in on this thing. And he never advertised. This is his house in Lexington. I went to the Lexington Green thing, you know, in April, and then I walked around the corner to his house, and it's sitting there. Somebody bought it a year ago or so for about $1.3 million, I think. But it's a very nice little house, but he bought it for $29,000, and he paid for it with partially his own stamps. He gave the guy a promissory note promising him 50% on his money with the scam. That was partially how he bought his house. This is his car. This was the nicest car on the road at the time, other than a Rolls Royce. Really slick car. Like I said, he was short. But so look at this picture. He looks pretty dapper. But look at the office. It's very plain. Here's the pad that he's filling out his promissory notes for. He just went to a local printer and got them made up. There was nothing special about them, but they look good. He had so much money that he couldn't figure out what to do with it. So he started buying things. So he bought a manufacturing company. He bought a construction company. He bought J.R. Poole. That was who he used to work for at the South End. He bought his old guy out. He bought a sardine factory, a meatpacking company. He bought 4 banks. So when he was running short of cash and he couldn't pay people off, he just took money from the banks that he owned. He stole from the banks. But there were not a lot of banking regulations. Nobody was watching this stuff. He also owned tenements and gave out mortgages. So he diversified his money, but then finally he was busted. And here he is he pled guilty. He had to do jail until 1924. They arrested him, and he leaves. Oh, so this was federal charges. Then he got arrested for state charges, but he skips to go to Florida. And here he is in Florida, looking different again. Now he has a new name. He's Charles Borelli. And what is he doing in Florida? What's he doing in Florida? Selling swampland in Florida. Charles Ponzi went down there and started selling swampland. He got convicted. Now here he is again, looking very different. And he tried to board a steamer to get out of the country. They caught him, and they sent him back to Charlestown, and that's where he ended up doing the rest of his jail time. Then he was getting deported in 1934. His wife did not divorce him, even after he pawned her jewelry. She stayed with him until then. Here he is getting deported. Here he is in Brazil. I just think this is interesting. So here's his indictment. So he's Charles Ponzi of Lexington, and they charged him with defrauding diverse persons. That was the best they could do. And yeah, there's the indictment. And here, here's his bankruptcy papers filed in 1923, because obviously they had to do something with he had no money on his own, but they had to do something with it. And he died in Brazil, 1949, with barely enough money to get buried. This is the interesting, well, there's a lot of interesting parts. This is interesting to see what goes on in his mind. Without malice or forethought, I have given them the best show that was ever staged in their territory since the landing of the Pilgrims. It was worth $15 million to watch me put the thing over on them. There's no sign that he cared about any of the 30,000 people that he took money from. All he cared about was he thought he was putting on a show. And that was fine with him. And it was fine with him that he wound up bankrupt. He was just doing whatever he could to take their money. No sign of any empathy at all. So how did he get away with it for so long? You would have thought the post office would have gotten onto him, or the government would have gotten onto him, or the newspapers would have gotten onto him. None of them did for different reasons. So there was a banking commissioner, this is the post office. They sent him all sorts of notices saying, stop doing this. You can't do this with these stamps. But they never publicized it. They never put the notices in the newspaper. There was no radio and TV, so nobody knew about it. And he just kept telling them, go away, I'm going to keep doing it. He just ignored them. So this guy sent him a really nasty letter saying, you can't do this as a medium of speculation. And he just said, go away. So the post office couldn't do anything. The only thing that did happen was some countries stopped issuing those stamps, and they said you can't redeem them for cash. Like I said, that was the real fatal flaw in this whole thing. Government officials. This guy was a banking commissioner. He was only interested in the interest rate. And he said if Ponzi wants to give people 50% on their money, he's an idiot, but he can go ahead and do it, so he just let him go. This guy knew about Ponzi in February when he first started and said, let it go. So he did nothing. The newspapers, I'm sure this is going to come as a shock to you, but if a newspaper printed the truth, I'm just going to make this up, you're a murderer. I print that he's a murderer. He can sue me up until 1964 because printing the truth was not a defense in a lawsuit. So the newspapers didn't want to print anything that was speculation because they would get sued and lose their newspaper. So nobody covered him at all until, so it changed in like 1964. So here's the first thing in a newspaper about him, June 9th. So remember I said he started operating January 1st. He's into June before the first thing shows up in a newspaper, and it's all good luck, happy stuff. Oh, this guy's running a get-rich-quick scheme. It's a good thing. They don't even name him, but they just say this is a good thing to invest in. So the newspapers are covering their butts so they don't get sued at this time. The next article didn't appear until July 24th, and again, it's all happy news and fairy tales and butterflies. It's all good stuff. He doubles your money. Ponzi's rich. He's worth $9 million. You should give it to him. All the authorities have looked at this. They say it's fine. You can't lose your money. These are all things in that article that everybody is reading in their newspapers twice a day, and cops are investing in it, so you should. The Boston Globe was the same thing a couple of days later, and they're saying the same stuff. Ponzi is great. Here's how he does it. You can invest with him. So they just pile on. He was finally caught because this guy. So you're going to recognize him once I get through this. But his name was Charles Barron. He was a Boston guy, went to Boston Latin. He was the owner and publisher of a couple of publications. One was called the Boston News Bureau, which is a Boston-based financial newspaper. So it followed, commodity prices and stock prices. He also owned a little thing called the Wall Street Journal and Dow Jones. And he is Barron's, right? Barron's, the newspaper, that's him. That was published out of his company. So he's the one who outed Ponzi. The regular newspapers wouldn't do it. Here's where his office was. It was off Post Office Square, Kilby Street. So I apologize, this is a little fuzzy. July 26, the Boston Post prints an interview with him. So they can say, we're not saying that he's a crook, but this guy, Barron, is saying he's a crook. And so Barron outs him. He's like, he's a crook, he can't be doing this, there's no basis for this, these stamps are worth a couple of pennies, why is he doing this at all? And then the next day in his own publication, he does the same thing. And he says, Ponzi is running this thing, you can't do this, where are their profits? He's just saying, forget it, this is a bad deal. The only attorney, government attorney, who went after Ponzi because he listened to Barron was this guy named Daniel Gallagher, the U.S. attorney, and he appointed an auditor, a guy named Edwin Pride, and Edwin Pride took 7 to 10 days to figure out that Ponzi was running a complete scam, and he gets indicted. And Ponzi says, yes, you're right, in August, and he pleads guilty in November. So being an accountant, I sort of have to put up this guy's picture because he's figured out the books. He was one of the first CPAs, too. Here's an important thing that Barron said to people. Every get-rich-quick scheme, meaning an investment scheme, any real scheme must have as its basis a new claim of discovery or a new invention, for sudden wealth can only come from something new. That's the only way you create wealth. You can't create wealth by trading in stamps. That's not how you do it. You have to have a new invention. You have to have a telephone. You have to have a computer. You have to have cell phones. That's where wealth comes from. So before Ponzi, there was actually a guy running a Ponzi scheme, except they didn't call it a Ponzi scheme. The only reason they didn't call it after him was he got caught after Ponzi. And his name was Leo Koretz. So if he had been caught, we'd be calling it a Koretz scheme, not a Ponzi scheme. But he was in Chicago, and he was running a scam in South America based on oil, that he controlled millions of acres in Panama. So he was telling people, I have oil wells in Panama, invest your money. People can't, members like Sarah Howe, you can't check with the Quakers, they're too far away. Who's going to go to Panama to check? They take his word. He gets a ton of money in from people. He was giving 60% returns. Finally, somebody went down to Panama, no oil wells, no oil derricks, no oil, just jungle. And then he gets caught in 1923, well, a little too late. Again, these are his words. Yes, I knew the bubble would burst, but I was indifferent to just where or how. I was so disgusted with those seeming friends who wanted to get something for nothing. He didn't care that he was taking money from his friends. He despised them for being that greedy. Now, he was greedy, but okay. So there have been other recent scams. That's sort of the end of the Charles Ponzi part. So, anybody recognize him? Bernie. Okay? Well, Bernie passed away in jail. So he started off investing for his father-in-law's clients, and he lost all their money, but his father-in-law gave him money to pay them back. So he could have been out of the business way before. Sort of like Ponzi could have been caught real early, but he wasn't. He also had a legitimate business processing trades for people, and that was the legit part of what he did, but he also had the investment part, which wasn't. He was a genius. He created the NASDAQ Securities Exchange. He was the first one to have electronic trading. He testified in front of Congress. He was held in the highest esteem by everybody in the financial community. Right? If it wasn't for him, there would not be online trading. You couldn't go on to Fidelity or Vanguard and look at your stuff. He's the one who started all that. So one side of his brain and his morals was one way. The other one was the other. So there were warnings about Madoff. He and these two guys raised $500 million to invest, and they got caught. But they weren't registered, right? If you're investing people's money, you have to be registered with the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and you have to be registered with the state. These guys weren't registered. They get caught. They should have gone to jail. But they said, just give the money back and we'll let you free. So he could have been caught a second time, and he wasn't. So his scheme was brilliant. First of all, people only got their information from paper statements that he sent them. You could not go online and check your stuff. So the only way you knew what was going on was what he told you. And he would say, okay, what's your name? Wayne. I want Wayne to make 15% this month. So Madoff on a piece of paper creates fake trades in GE, to give him 15%. And what's your name? Vicky. I want Vicky to make 18% the next month. I do fake trades to give her 18%. He never invested one penny of the money he took in. It was all stolen for him. But on paper, Wayne was making 15, Vicky was making 20%. He only had one down quarter in 30 years. Think of that. The stock market goes up and down like this every minute. To his clients, they only lost money one quarter in 30 years. And oh, by the way, we did have crashes in the middle of that. But his people never lost money on paper. They thought they were rich. So his sons operated on one floor, the legit business, the trading company. On the floor above, he ran his scam. And he hired people with only high school degrees. He told them what to do. They were not smart enough to know that what he was doing was a scam. They were just following his orders. He also paid them an exorbitant amount of money so they would never squeal on him. He knew who to bribe to keep quiet. And his sons ran the other business. Also, he had some big backers that when he was short of cash, they would write him a check for $100 million. Right? If his Ponzi scheme was dipping, if he wasn't getting new people, they would bail him out. And they were in on it. This is the best part. So if you're running a billion-dollar enterprise, you would think you'd have one of the world-class accounting firms, right? Ernst & Young, Price Waterhouse, whatever. He had a one-man CPA firm in a strip mall next to a pizza joint. That was his CPA who was supposed to be auditing these billions of dollars that he was investing for people. Unbelievable. So he had rules. Investors could never tell they invested with him. He wanted it kept quiet. He only dealt with referrals. Remember Sarah Howe? I only take you in if you come in through a friend. He made people feel like he was doing them a favor. You know, I have so much money, I'm already investing. All right, Wayne, I'll take your retirement money. But I don't want to, but I'll take it from you. And people believed him. Right? Like I said, he only lost in one quarter. If people wanted their money back, he paid them instantly, which built up with everybody that he was honest. Oh my God, you know, I needed $500,000 to buy a house. Bernie sent it to me right away. He must be a good guy. That was a way to bribe people. Also, he said that he was able to make his high returns because of information on the floor below, which was nonsense. That was just made up. The other thing was there were things called feeder funds. So feeder funds are people all over the world who know very rich people who get them to send their money to Bernie. So these are all the feeder funds all over the world, and he was paying these people double the regular commission so that they would be quiet. Again, bribing their silence. Every one of those places were getting money from kings, queens, people who own BMW, the super, super, super rich. They would go to, you know, the Swiss Alps, where all the rich people hang out. They'd go to Monaco. They'd go to all the rich people places. And that's where they scam the money through feeder funds to send it to good old Bernie right in the middle. He wasn't a stupid guy. He finally was busted in 2008 with the stock market crash because people wanted their cash and he didn't have enough. So he finally had to say, yes, I'm running a scam, and he tells his two sons, who had no idea that this was a scam. They go running to the FBI, he gets arrested the next day, and those are the perp walk pictures that you've seen on TV. He and his wife both tried to kill themselves. Did not, obviously. So in total, he took 20 billion people from 40,000 people in 125 countries. That was his take. And he was sentenced to 150 years in jail and only did a few years of it and passed away. So here's somebody was talking about Madoff victims. Kevin Bacon and Kira Sedgwick, right? The actor and actress. Steven Spielberg and Katzenberg. Elie Wiesel. Larry King. Fred Wilpon, who owned the Mets. He almost lost the team because of how much money he had to give back that he had accumulated through this. Carl Shapiro, I don't know much about women's clothing, but he owned something called K. Windsor Clothing. He was a huge donor to the Museum of Fine Arts, to Brandeis, to the Beth Israel Hospital. So, where did Bernie get a lot of his clients? He went to Pine Brook Country Club, local club, which is predominantly Jewish. Bernie was doing an affinity scheme, going after people who were Jewish like him. Ponzi went after Italians. It doesn't matter. They go after people who are like them. And in Florida, he had the Palm Beach Country Club, also predominantly Jewish. So he was just going after people who were like him. Now, most of the money was able to be clawed back because the law said, the judges said, these people were smart enough to know they were getting scammed. They knew it was all a fake. They should never have kept the money. So most of them had to write big checks back in, and then that money was given to other people who'd lost money. So this guy clawed back $14 billion. He got $7 billion from this guy. This is the Shapiro. They lost $700 million. This Rye Investment Group, $1 billion. This investment group, $900 million. And this group, almost $700 million. So they got a lot of the money back. Unfortunately, there was so much havoc because of Madoff. This is one of his sons committed suicide. This is his sister. She and her husband committed suicide. This was a guy who he lost $7 billion of his client's money and $50 million of his own. He killed himself. This guy was from a European aristocracy. He had billions of dollars. He was connected with kings and queens. He felt so bad that he locked himself in his office, put 2 waste paper baskets on the floor, slit each wrist, and bled out. And that was how he killed himself. And there were multiple people who jumped out of buildings. They had just lost everything. It was like the stock market crash in 1929. People just jumped out of buildings. So where was the Securities and Exchange Commission? They were nowhere. They were supposed to be policing him. Whenever they did an audit, they sent in rookies who he just blew away. In 2008, there was a letter to the SEC chairman that Madoff had 2 sets of books. The guy took the letter, put it in a drawer, never looked into anything. Right? These people had warnings. Here's what Madoff said about himself. Remember, I've put up the quotes from the other scammers? There's nothing for me to change from. It's not like I considered myself a bad person. I made a horrible mistake and I'm sorry. A horrible mistake. You scammed 30,000 people out of $20 billion. That's not one mistake. That's a lifetime of mistakes. But this is what he thought of himself. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I didn't mean to break that glass. Right? That's the level of mistake he thought he made. And it was way more than that. So there were warnings about him from this guy, who is Harry Markopoulos, a Boston securities analyst. And he worked for a company that competed against Madoff. And his bosses went to him and said, how is Madoff doing all this great returns? We can't duplicate it. We're losing clients. So he thought about it, and it took him 20 minutes to figure out that Madoff was running a scam. It took him the afternoon to document it, 4 hours. After 4 hours, he could prove that Madoff was running a scam. So what did he do with that? He went to the government 4 times. He went to them once in 2000, once in 01, once in 05, and once in 07. 4 times he went to the government, telling them, showing them the proof. They ignored him. They said, you're from Boston, we're from New York. We know better than you. You're just a hick. They never did anything about it at all. So just like Ponzi, there were warnings. People just ignored them. They were complicit. So there have been a bunch of other recent scams. So this guy was from Texas, real estate guy. He sets a bank up in Antigua. Very lax banking laws. And what does he do? He promises above average rates of returns. Sarah Howe, Ponzi, the guy in Montreal, they promise above average returns. It's all a crock. He was convicted of stealing $8 billion, and they only recovered $1 billion. They don't know where the rest is. He hid it somewhere. He's in jail for 110 years. This guy was the guy who started the boy bands, right? The Backstreet Boys and NSYNC. He stole money from them. He said he owned an airline, that he was leasing jets to music groups, when they were doing their concerts. So this is the airplane he said he owned. So I have to put this down for a second. So what he did was he had somebody hold up a model of an airplane in front of a picture of an airport. So what you can't see right over here where the tail, I'll go back. What you can't see right here, they cut off the tail, because that's where somebody's hand was that was holding up the fake airplane that he said he owned. Clever as hell. But that's what he told people. I own an airline. Look, here's the picture of it. And he said he was giving high interest rates, just like everybody else. And other music groups he took money from, Yeah, there's the hand. holding the airplane up. I like that. He took $300 million from people, and he took $200 million from banks. He forged documents saying he owned things, and he didn't, and that was their collateral. So, and his accounting firm was called Cohen and Siegel, named after the gangsters Mickey Cohen and Bugsy Siegel. That's what's his accounting firm. And he did 25 years in jail, but only served 8. Any of you know her? The blood lady, right? 1 drop of blood, I can tell everything that's wrong with you. Totally untrue. She raised, she was all over the place. She was a deal. She raised $700 million The whole thing was a scam. There was no testing. Everything was a lie. 11 years in jail. Anybody remember this guy? Mr. Bitcoin, right? I don't do that. So he stole $10 billion from people, and he's doing 25 years in jail. Personally, I think she should be doing more, but nobody asked me. This woman was in Jamaica. Oh, no, this is a different woman. So this woman had different names. Peggy Fulford, King, Williams, Simpson, Rivers, and Berard. That was her real name. So she told people that she went to Harvard Law and Harvard MBA, and that she made so much money that she would manage your money for free. All you had to do was give it to her, and she would manage it for you without paying her a fee at all. Of course it was nonsense. She never went to school anywhere, and she just stole money from people. So, yeah, she was great. So she stole $6 million. Anybody recognize him? Dennis Rodman, absolutely. She went after athletes. So she went after Dennis Rodman, Ricky Williams, Travis Best, Rashad McCants. They're all football and basketball guys. Oh, that was her affinity thing, was athletes. This woman was in Jamaica, and she ran, helped run it. She was a client and relationship manager for a company, but she had access to everybody's details. And she needed money for her father's cancer treatment and his funeral, so she just stole money from clients' accounts. Once she realized nobody could track her, she just kept doing it. So she took tons of money from, recognize him? Usain Bolt, right? Fastest man in the world. Made a ton of money. Incredible runner. She took $13 million from him, which was almost all of his life savings. So just because you're famous doesn't mean you don't get scammed. As a matter of fact, it's more likely because you have money. This guy, so this one's interesting. I did this presentation to a smaller group, and afterwards a guy came up to me and said he was scammed by this old guy. He belonged to a little coffee clutch. They would get together like every day or every week for coffee at a local place. And he was the nicest guy in the world, didn't ask him for money, but all talked about how he was making money in the stock market, that he had a way of figuring out what stocks were good and what weren't. Never asked people for money, but then they started volunteering to him. And the guy at my presentation finally talked him into taking his own money. And he was 72. He was a retired pharmaceutical salesman. This, he's just a nice old guy. He promised 6% a month, 72%. Obviously impossible. And the guy who was in my audience went to the FBI when he finally realized it, and he wore a wire, and that's how they caught this guy. And now the guy who was in my audience, he's getting $30 a month from his Social Security check, which will never equal what he lost. He didn't tell me how much he lost, but he said it was he was in his 40s and it was every penny he had. He gave to this guy. So this guy took $1.7 million from 52 people. This is what this guy's son said. My father is a ruthless, unfulfilled, manipulative opportunist who envied a wealthier high school friend and tried to find investors for oil wells. That's what his son said about him. He knew his dad was a crook. So he ran that for 6 years. Did jail time. This guy owned a radio station in Boston. It was a financial news station. And he was an advisor on the Boston's North Shore. His wife, Bonnie, was also an advisor and was on the radio show. He defrauded 140 people out of $33 million being on the radio. His wife knew nothing about it. She never got convicted of anything, but he did, and he just took money and put it in his personal account. He never sent confirmations of statements. He prepared their statements, and he had to make out checks to different places. So if somebody's telling you, make this check this way versus this way, bad sign. So he confessed, and then he attempted suicide but didn't kill himself. Oh, he went after Masons, right? I said Italians, Jews, whatever, Masons. Why not? So here's a bunch of celebrity victims. Sting, his accountant stole $9 million from him. Dane Cook, the local comedian, his brother-in-law, $12 million from him. Everybody recognized Jabbar. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, exactly. He gave his attorney power of attorney, and what did the guy do? He invested in oil wells and Arabian horses and lost a ton of his money. Be careful about giving over power of attorney. Everybody recognize him. His brother-in-law stole $30 billion. The only way it was caught, remember he was married to Christy Brinkley? They were on an airplane. They were flying coach. His brother-in-law was in first class. Christy's like, there's something wrong with this picture, that we're back here and he's up there. And they started investigating and found out that his brother-in-law took all that money from him. George Harrison, his manager, stole $16 million from him. This is Stan Lee, who did all the comic books. His life was essentially taken over, and he was a hostage and paraded out to comic book places. But his manager stole a bunch of money. Uma Thurman, Wesley Snipes, Annie Leibovitz, and all were ripped off by a guy named Kenneth Starr. This guy stole money from Leonardo DiCaprio, Ben Affleck, and Matt Damon. Okay? Now, he was from Medford. So, what makes a con man? A, they're a cheater. B, they think they're smarter than everybody else. They can gain your trust. It may take years over coffee, but they will gain your trust. You will believe in them. They don't care about you at all. They're psychopaths. Financial psychopaths, not murder psychopaths, but financial psychopaths. They don't care. And they think they are owed your money. You should earn it, but then they should have it. They shouldn't have to work for it. That's what they're like. What makes a victim? And again, I understand there are lots of scams that this doesn't apply to, but in some cases this does. What makes somebody a victim? Many times they're too trusting, or they're lonely and eager for a relationship. They want a connection with somebody. They've gotten divorced. A spouse died, whatever. Their kids live in California. They're alone. They want somebody. Some of these people, like the ones with Madoff, thought they could get out and make their money before they were caught. And eventually they were caught anyway. And sometimes victims also think they are owed more money than they have. So the moral of these stories, and this is the wind-up, and I don't mean to scare you, but in a sense I mean to scare you. If something sounds too good to be true, it is too good to be true. Run away. Somebody promises you high interest rates or stuff like that. Run. Run. Stocks earn 8% over the last 70 years. Bonds earn 4%. If anybody tells you you can make more than that on stocks or bonds, they are lying. It can't be done over the long term. Short term, maybe. Long term, they can't. That's the returns you can earn. Anything more than that, somebody's pulling your leg. Only invest with registered people. Make sure they're registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Secretary of State. Look to see that. Contact those agencies. Find out. Right? Madoff had his one-man CPA firm next to the pizza joint. If anybody had made one call, they would have known he was a scam. Don't sign your power of attorney lightly. I know it has to be done at times as you age, but be very, very careful. This one's hard. Don't trust family and friends. Go to professionals. That's what they do. Go to Fidelity, go to Vanguard, go to name places, Charles Schwab, right? Check on people. Don't trust, this is hard. Don't trust family and friends. Go to professionals, pay the fee. It's like you're charged with a crime or something. You don't get a lawyer off the street. You get a lawyer. You pay the lawyer. That's why they're lawyers. Nothing is guaranteed. If somebody says you're never going to lose money, never happen. Never, ever happen. People lose money all the time. Watch out for things that say, everyone is buying this. Send money now, and the best, there's a free lunch. Come to this thing, you'll get free macaroni and cheese, and somebody will teach you how to become a millionaire. And watch for groups that you are connected with. Religion, nationality, social group, anything. People who are in that, who are trying to get your money, are running an affinity scam. Watch, and I know this is hard. I mean, you trust people, they're your friends or whatever. But friends are friends. Friends don't, try and get your money. That's different. I have my golf group. I would play golf with any of them. I wouldn't trust any of them with a penny. They cheat. So these are books about Ponzi that are very good if you're interested. These helped me write my book. Ponzi actually wrote his own book called The Rise of Mr. Ponzi. It's all a lie, but it's a great read. So there's a thing on Netflix about Bernie Madoff. There's a movie called The Wizard of Lies. There's a book by Jim Campbell about Madoff. And then Harry Markopolos has a great book, No One Would Listen. So if you're really interested in this, there's great things to look or watch or read. And this is getting late. I'll get out of here. These are my books. I sell them in the back. So if somebody wants to buy them, I'll be glad to sell it. If not, those are my books. I've already done that. I'll let you guys get out of here and have your lunch. Oh, this is my marketing, right? This is my marketing. So there's a sale. If you buy them through me instead of through Amazon, they're a little cheaper. But whatever. I'll get through that. And I'm done. Thank you all very much. If any of you have stories about this sort of stuff, if you wouldn't mind, I would love to hear them. They're cautionary tales that I tell to other groups, and it's helpful to let other people know about stuff.